What's going on, everybody? It's Wednesday, and life is finally back to normal, or at least somewhat. You know, we had a great trip down to San Diego for Lucy's soccer tournament. Team ended up finishing 2-1, finished third place. Lucy had a nice goal. Let me show you her goal right here. And yeah, I mean, great goal. And in case you didn't notice, that was with her left foot, her off foot. She's right-footed. And she took that from kind of a crazy angle and carved it in. So super proud of her. Great time, great fun, great memories. My wife got sick the first night there. So I took the girls on Thanksgiving over to SeaWorld. We had fun. They've added a bunch of roller coasters and stuff. So Lucy and I went on a bunch of those together. Molly wasn't really feeling up to some of the roller coasters, so she stayed back on some of them, but we had a great time at SeaWorld. So, it's Wednesday, which means Q&A day, right? And Q&A day is always a lot of fun for me. It is my favorite day of the week doing Q&A. But first, I've got to show you my buddy Golden Slumber, who has been a longtime supporter and commenter and Q&A questioner of the channel. He sent me such a sweet care package. His note was second to none. Could not have been nicer. So that was so much fun to read. It really made me feel good. Let me show you some of the cool stuff he sent me. First off, this Bob Lemon. He could, I've been collecting these, right? I started collecting these Hall of Fame plaque autos and postcards. So that was a very cool one. A nice George Kell. Another one, very cool. There's something about some of these autographs when these guys are kind of later in life that's so humanizing. When they're autographed, you can see their age in it that I can really appreciate. You got this Slaughter autograph one. So how sweet are these? How kind of him. You got a Catfish Hunter. Very cool Catfish Hunter autograph. And then last but not least, my guy, Yogi Berra. This one's not signed, but so cool to add that one to the list. In addition to that, he sent me, check this out, a box of Desert Storm cards. I remember these. It's still sealed. It's still shut. So cool. I will treasure this for sure. Very cool. And then look at this. Back to my junk wax days. Now this would be the 91 Topps Micro set. You remember these micro cards? I remember these. Super cool. So thank you so much to my friend for sending that to me. You guys continue to absolutely spoil me, and it means a lot when you do that. So thank you, my friend. Let's go ahead, first off, and take a look at our very first question. But before we do that, actually, just a reminder, if you have a question that you want me to feature on an upcoming episode, all you have to do is down below in the comments, simply type out your question. And I look forward to the questions that you send. And again, I pick 5 each week. There were some really good ones this week that I couldn't pick because there were so many good ones. But do not hesitate to resend a question or send a question that you might have for me. I really enjoy seeing your questions and giving you my opinion on the topics that you bring up. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at that first question for this week. When AI grading becomes standard, so there's no human error, and personal opinions in the grade, do you feel old school human graded PSA 10s will lose value? I got some PSA 9s what look a lot better than PSA 10 cards. Either the 9 was graded wrong or the 10 was graded wrong. Why have human graded cards where half the time they are wrong? If you send a PSA 9 back, it stays a 9 only half the time. Oh, whenever we get into that whole grading conversation, which again we know is very, very intertwined into the card community at this point, there are always going to be strong opinions. And I've mentioned this in previous videos. If you've got a bunch of cards that are in PSA holders, you don't want to hear anybody say anything negative about PSA. And if your whole collection is in SGC holders, you don't want to hear anybody bag on SGC or whichever company that you have. Now, that's normal. We're protecting our turf, right? People want to look out for what they have money invested in. But then there comes, things are always going to change. Things are always going to be moving. There's always moving parts going on. And it has been pretty much established that collectors value grading. Not all of them. There are some people who cannot stand grading. And then there are other people who think that grading is the best thing that ever happened to card collecting. And I can see both sides of the picture. I can see both sides of that. And I think that there are valid arguments on both sides of that. The thing that could disrupt everything is if people went all in on computerized, automated, AI-style grading. That is the one thing that could throw everything out the window. Will it happen? I don't know. But it's not impossible to think that a company like Tag becomes the industry standard, and then people start getting cards graded by Tag that are in other holders. And then Tag starts seeing things that the human eye didn't. That's possible. Will it happen? It could happen. It could happen. Will it happen? Maybe. The market dictates what happens. Now, let's just go back a few years into the 1990s. There was a very famous trial. Wait, how did we just go from grading companies to a trial? Hear me out. There was a very famous football player who was on a very famous murder trial. And they brought up DNA. And at the time, DNA was not as widely accepted as legitimate, as fully accurate as it is now. Now, if you say your DNA was found at the scene, it's kind of presented as a fact. At that time, DNA being at the scene was probably. At least that's how a lot of people took it. Now, some of you are going, wait a second, I didn't. Some of you are saying, no, I thought it was a fact then. And some people are saying, I'm still not sure if it's a fact. The overwhelming majority of society now would say if DNA tests as a match, it's pretty darn close to a fact. We didn't used to feel that way. But public opinion has shifted. Acceptance of that technology has changed. And I think if we ran the same evidence at the same trial with a different jury today, with where we stand on DNA technology, I think there might be a different outcome. Now, again, people are probably throwing rotten tomatoes at the camera, and some of you are nodding, yes, you're probably right, and some of you are saying it should have been. This is not about OJ. This is about acceptance of new technologies. Do I think at some point in the near future that automated, computerized grading technologies will become the industry standard? I'd say probably. And if that happens, what happens to all those previous grades that are in holders? That's a really good question. Now, none of us know, but I think it's safe to assume that if the card collecting community fully adopts AI type, computerized type grading, it could certainly have the potential of overriding the existing grades. That is possible. And if that is possible, that is something we all need to be aware of. Which brings us back to the commonly used phrase of buy the card, not the grade. The grade assigned to a card by a grader at any of these companies on a given day, we have learned over and over and over that not the same grade is assigned on the same card if the day is different or the grader is different. We've seen many examples of that. If those examples haven't proven to us by now that grading is truly just an opinion, I don't know what else to say as evidence. But I could see if the same card got put under the same machine by tag 40 times in a row, and 40 times in a row it received the exact same grade, that could change things. If the community adopts it. Will they? Maybe. Do I think they will eventually? Probably. And what will happen? Who knows? But it could throw everything out the window. So buy the card, not the grade that's assigned to it by one of these grading companies. Let's look at the next question. I know you're a vintage collector, but what are your thoughts about doing a modern era player run where you collect and grade as the player is still playing? I'm thinking along the lines of Hall of Fame, like Mike Trout. All right, so I'm going to go back to a statement I've said many, many times, and that is collect what you like. If you like Mike Trout cards, you should be collecting Mike Trout cards. If you like Ernie Banks cards, you should be collecting Ernie Banks cards. If you like some specific set and the look of a certain style of card, that's what you should collect, because ultimately, this is about fun for our own personal enjoyment, not what we think somebody else would like. So that would be my first point. If you want to collect a modern player, collect the modern player. If we're speculating, which is, I think, part of what this question is encompassing, is speculating on current players and current prospects and current, but it sounds like likely Hall of Famers, the Clayton Kershaws, the Justin Verlanders, the Mike Trouts, the guys that will make the Hall of Fame. They just, their career's not over yet, and they are, haven't had the waiting period to get in. Personally, again, I collect really one modern player, and that is my guy, Matt Manning, former student of mine, right, on the Detroit Tigers rotation. And occasionally I'll speculate and buy a couple of newer guys that I think, might jump up, or I enjoy watching, or I think is undervalued. But it's kind of rare. I think some of the newer cards are very cool looking. They're very shiny. They're very flashy. They're a lot of them are beautiful. But I don't think I fully understand modern cards. Like, I don't understand all the parallels. There's like the, disco and the firework and the tie-dye and the green and the orange and the blue and the numbered and the not numbered. It's a short print. It's a super short print. I don't really understand it. And I know people go, well, these guys are still relevant. People care about these guys. Yeah, but they're not rare. And they go, yes, they are. That's a super short print. That's an out of 25. There's only 25 of them. There was a time where I think out of 25 kind of meant something. Kind of. But now there's an out of 25 this one, and out of 25 that one, and there's the field level one, and there's the stadium level club one, and there's so many variations. I mean, Trevor Lawrence has to have like 1,000 different rookie cards, doesn't he? I just don't know how anyone will ever determine which of those things is really worth having and the best one. And not to mention, a lot of these guys turn out to be busts. I mean, literally, a couple of years ago, guys were screaming when they would get, Mac Jones cards, and people were selling Mac Jones for $100,000. But you could buy a Joe Montana rookie card and a PSA 10 for way less than that. How does that even make sense? And now Mac Jones, does he even have a job? I mean, over the summer, people were talking about, Justin Fields, you got to buy Justin Fields. And it's like, they're going to fire their coach after the season. And so I'm never really into that hype. And again, I know you're not talking about prospects. You're talking about the Hall of Fame trajectory guys. The LeBrons and the Mike Trouts and the Aaron Rodgers type guys. I get it. But again, I continue to go back to there are so many different parallels from each different line. There's the Topps, and then there's the Topps Chrome, and then there's the Bowman Chrome, and then there's the Bowman, and then there's the Topps Finest, and then there's so many different lines, and then within each line, there's so many different parallels. Doesn't feel much different than junk wax. It's just colorful. It's very colorful, and they're all mildly different. It's not for me because I don't understand it, and I'm not really that interested in understanding it. If I have $500 to buy a card, I'm going to buy a decent grade Walter Payton rookie. I'm not going to go out and buy a CJ Stroud. It's just not my thing. But if it's somebody else's thing, knock yourself out. Because back to where I started with this question, it's all about collecting what you like. So if you like all of the newer parallel Mike Trout cards, go buy them. And then don't worry about the rest of it. Don't worry about me. But if I've considered doing it, not really. Not really. But occasionally I'll pick up a newer card of a guy that I like. Who do you believe were the 5 greatest pitchers of all time? And what is your favorite card of each player? Okay, so here's what I want to point out about this question. Ken has asked a lot of really good questions. I've used his question several times. He asked great questions. And he asked this question, I think, last week. I didn't get to it. And he asked it again this week, and I said, I recognize that question. I remember that question. I'm going to get to that question. That's going to move to the top of my list because I saw it before, and now I'm seeing it again. So if you ask me a question, and I don't use it that week, just ask the same question again the following week. I will get to it. I promise. And this is an impossible question. How do you pick 5 guys? First of all, I'm gonna not include my guy Roger Clemens because I'm biased. So yes, I think Roger Clemens is one of the top 5 best pitchers of all time. I know a lot of you just hit the close button on the window when I said that, and that's okay. But he's still my guy. He'll always be my guy. And regardless of what he did or didn't do is irrelevant. He's my guy. So other than Roger Clemens, that's the question, right? So It's very, very difficult to compare eras, right? I think if Randy Johnson pitched in the, pre-war era, I think he would have had a lot of perfect games and a lot of no-hitters. But he didn't pitch then. He pitched in the modern era. He threw really hard, had a devastating slider, really hard on lefties especially. How do you not include him on the list, right? But I'm kind of, when I look at guys, it's sort of like, how were they compared to the players at their time? And this could create a whole different debate, and I'm not going to jump into that debate right now. I'm just going to answer this question. So I made my list. I wrote down my names. These are in no particular order. I think a lot of people would agree that Walter Johnson is on the list of the top 5 pitchers of all time. Most people that make a list, he's going to make the list. A lot of the other guys I'm going to give you maybe wouldn't make everybody's list, but Walter Johnson I think would make most. Now, Walter Johnson has a lot of great cards. But you're asking me my favorite card of each of these guys. So my favorite card of Walter Johnson is his T206 portrait card. I really like this card. I like the yellow background. I like the look. I like how fancy those guys look. It's like they're, it's like these military guys when they take the pictures in their formal outfit versus like their fatigues. Like the formal outfit were those portrait shots. So I really think Walter Johnson has to be on the list, and I love his portrait from the T206 set. So that's on there for sure. Christy Mathewson is on my list. Now, of course, I'm a little bit biased towards some of the, the vintage guys, because those are the cards that I'm most interested in. It's not that fun to say, I really like the 1987 Donruss Greg Maddux card, and Greg Maddux is the top 5 pitcher. I think Greg Maddux is very arguably a top 5 pitcher. I will not be including Pedro Martinez on this list. So all of you Red Sox fans, you can look at someone else's list for a top 5. He was very good, but he's not on my list. Greg Maddux is somebody who probably should be considered on the list, but he's not on the list because the card that you would pick isn't really that much fun. So back to my list. The second person I'm listing, in no particular order, Christy Mathewson, a first ballot Hall of Famer. Now, do not forget, he's an inaugural Hall of Famer, first ballot Hall of Famer, in a year that Cy Young did not make it. Cy Young is a second ballot Hall of Famer. Christy Mathewson is a first ballot Hall of Famer. These are the writers, these are the voters in that era that, experienced all this. So anyway, Christy Mathewson, his T205 card is his best card. For me, not close. Love that card. That's one of the top 5 to 10 of my favorite cards of any card, let alone pitcher card. So T205, Christy Mathewson. It starts getting tougher because now I'm starting to go, well, is Bob Gibson really not going to be on my list? Because if I have Game 7 of the World Series and I can pick anybody to take the mound of Game 7 of the World Series and I'm the manager, I don't know how you don't pick Bob Gibson. Like, that guy had times that he was insanely dominant and scary and good and clutch. With that said, I don't think I'm going with Bob Gibson on my list. So I'm going to go with Sandy Koufax next. As dominant as there was, the only thing he didn't have was longevity. But Sandy Koufax, for me, is on my top 5 list. Sandy Koufax, now, he has a lot of good cards. He doesn't have a ton of cards because he didn't play a ton of years, but I genuinely love his rookie card. I think his rookie card is gorgeous. Like, looks-wise, to me, the 55 tops, Sandy Koufax is in the top 10 best looking cards of all time. And for me, he's in the top 5 pitchers of all time. So I've got Walter Johnson, I've got Sandy Koufax, and I've got Christy Mathewson. So I have 2 left. Okay, that's right. Tom Seaver. Tom Seaver's on my list. Again, absolutely dominating. When he was dominant, he was dominating. And, I mean, just ask any Mets fan. If you ask any Met fan, who's your all-time guy? I mean, isn't it Tom Seaver? Tom Seaver was absolutely devastating as a pitcher. Now, his rookie card isn't that cool because he shares it with another person, but his second-year card, that 68 tops rookie trophy Tom Seaver card, I think is such a great-looking card. Even though he's not looking face on to the camera, it's still such a cool card. I love the card. And if you had to put a starting rotation together, he's got to be on the shortest of short lists. To me, those 4 those are guys I'm picking. Again, Gibson's tough. Because, again, I've said this before. Whenever you make a list, the argument is who was left off, not who was on. It's not, oh, those were 5 great picks. It's, but what about this guy who's, number 6? You can make the argument, Randy Johnson. Clemens, we've excluded. Greg Maddux, Bob Gibson. So who do I go with next? Now, there are going to be people yelling, Cy Young, and there are going to be people yelling, Cleveland Grover Alexander, and there's going to be a lot of different opinions. I'm going to go Lefty Grove. Lefty Grove, if you look at statistically, just dominating. Just absolutely dominating. And, in all categories, just dominant. And so Lefty Grove is probably my number 5. That one is one that a good amount of people would go, oh, for sure. And then a good amount of people would go, you're insane. I cannot believe you didn't say Pedro. I'm never going to say Pedro on my list. Pedro will never be on my top 5 list. Pedro was really good, though. So Lefty Grove. Now, my favorite Lefty Grove card, I really like the 33 Gaudy Lefty Grove. The 33 Gaudy set is just awesome, right? And the 33 Gaudy Lefty Grove is just a really cool card. It's kind of pulled back a little bit. It's not like a face shot, but you can kind of see, you can kind of see his throwing motion. He's kind of hanging out. I don't know. There's something about it that really catches my eye. So that's my number 5. I know you guys are going to tell me where I blew it, but that's my 5. Are people unintentionally lowering the pop of key rookie cards by getting them signed? I recently did a search for the 61 Fleer Jerry West rookie card and had trouble finding one that wasn't graded. I think the traditional lower graded rookie cards are getting harder to find unsigned. This question is very timely for me. I really like this question, and I really like it because it's so timely. So there are certain cards that for several years I've just checked up on, right? I like the Yogi Berra rookie card, the 48 Bowman. I like the Ernie Banks. I like the 57 Brooks Robinson. There are several cards. I love the Don Drysdale 57 tops. And there are certain cards I'm always just like, oh, are there any endings soon? Are there any good deals? What are those selling for right now? And one of the cards is the 61 tops Juan Marichal. And this morning, I'm like, I haven't looked that card up for a while. What's it going for right now? Because you can buy a pretty decent copy of that card for like $150 to $200 for a nice looking Juan Marichal who was like a dominant pitcher during the 60s. This dominant. who, by the way, still is signing through the mail autographs. I think he's like $10. Anyway, so I looked up this morning Juan Marichал's rookie card, and half of them were autographed. I mean, I think with the surge in popularity of vintage rookie cards being signed, and knowing that Juan Marichal signs through the mail for like, I think it's $10. It might be $20. I think it's $10. I think a lot of people have been sending them off to Juan Marichal. And obviously there's a risk, because what if it doesn't come back? So a lot of the ones that are sent off aren't like, high grade ones. They're, decent looking 2, 3, 4 range. Probably more like 2s and 3s. And so there's a surge of them that have showed up online. So I guess I'm going to take this question and I'm going to turn it around and say, is it that Juan Marichal is just sitting there signing his rookie card all day as the mail arrives? Or is it that the ones that are listed for sale are the people who are trying to cash in on this recent trend of autographed rookie cards of vintage Hall of Famers? I think if you were to look at the population report of Juan Marichal 61 Topps rookie cards, and then you were to look at the population report of autographed Juan Marichal 1961 rookie cards, I think that you would see that the population is so much less of the autographed one. It's just a lot of people are trying to capitalize on this trend. They are trying to send them up. I mean, because he's old, like he's not young, right? Let's just say he was 20 when he was a rookie. That means he was born in 1940. That makes him in his mid-80s, right? Probably early to mid-80s. So, he's still signing, and people are going, oh, he's still alive, I can sign it. And then we just lost Brooks Robinson, right? So a lot of people were probably thinking to cash in on this with Brooks Robinson, then we lose Brooks Robinson. They're like, well, I'm going to get Juan Marichal before Juan Marichal, stops signing or, we lose him. So I don't know if it's so much that they're all getting signed, that all the low-grade ones are getting signed, or if the ones that are listed for sale are people trying to profit from this more recent trend of autographed vintage Hall of Fame rookie cards. I think it's probably more people trying to make a quick buck by getting a card that wasn't super eye-appealing before, signed, and flipping it for a profit. But I think that when the dust settles, there will be a lot more ungraded and unsigned than what you're seeing showing up for sale percentage-wise. And I think whether it's Jerry West, which, by the way, his rookie card's really expensive, or a lesser expensive one like Juan Marichal, I think that when the dust settles, you're going to see not as many of them are signed as it currently appears if you were to do like an eBay search. But that's just a guess. If Fanatics is able to 10x the hobby, presumably a portion of these new collectors will end up collecting vintage baseball cards. Purely from a supply and demand standpoint, does that mean inexpensive cards at similar price points from the 1960s will appreciate much higher than those from the 1970s? For example, a VGVGX 1974 rookie card of Dave Winfield is about $20, and so is a VGVGX copy of a 1960 Jim Cott rookie card. Winfield, a first ballot Hall of Famer, is clearly superior in ability and popularity to Cott, a more fringe Hall of Famer who didn't get in until the 80s via the Veterans Committee. But if I'm a new to the hobby and I want to collect a Hall of Fame rookie card, I'm going to need to buy both of them. Only there's less Cotts to go around.
Does that mean the Cott, or any rookie card from the 60s, the better the investment over the long term versus those from the 1970s, regardless of who the player is?
I love this question. I love this question not because of the question itself necessarily, but I love where your brain is at. Your brain is looking for an anomaly. You're saying, why is this doing this and this is doing that? If there's something that just doesn't seem right, we have to figure out why. And what you're saying is, wait a second, Dave Winfield's a Hall of Famer. Jim Cott's a Hall of Famer. The prices are, sort of similar, but there are less Jim Cotts. Doesn't that mean that the long-term value of the Jim Cott should be more valuable because it's older and there's less of them? I really like this line of thought. I love looking for stuff like this. But I think this particular question, your question has part of the answer in it, at least from my perspective. And I'm totally open to being wrong here. Jim Cott was a Veterans Committee guy who, after years and years and years, finally gets into the Hall. And there's not something about him, like when Minnie Minoso got into the Hall of Fame eventually. Minnie Minoso is more than just a really good player who got into the Hall of Fame through the Veterans Committee. He also broke down barriers. He also represented underrepresented groups. He also did things that are revered. When we look at Jim Cott got in. Jim Cott was a very, very good pitcher. Also a very good defensive pitcher. But the reason I think his card and Winfield's card are similar in value, despite there being far more Dave Winfield's, is the demand. There's no doubt that there is a lower supply of Jim Cotts than Dave Winfield's. One, because what are they, like 14 years apart or something like that? So there are less Cotts than there are Winfields. But if the price is the same, the only reason for that could be the demand. So is the demand higher for a Dave Winfield? Absolutely. Number one, Dave Winfield was a Yankee for the overwhelming majority of his career. Number two, Dave Winfield is a hitter, and we all know that pitchers tend to be kind of overlooked and kind of undervalued. Number three, Americans love power, and Dave Winfield had a powerful arm and he had a powerful bat. And Jim Cott was not this powerful pitcher like a Nolan Ryan or a Tom Seaver. The money tends to flow towards the popular teams, the popular players and characters, and the power guys. So I don't think that there's an anomaly with Jim Cott. I think we have a first ballot Hall of Famer who was a Yankee, who was a power guy, who was a hitter. That's Dave Winfield. And then we have Jim Cott, who is a very good pitcher, a Hall of Fame pitcher, who eventually got in via the Veterans Committee. That is the reason the demand is higher for Winfield. So yes, the supply is lower. Just like the supply is lower for Jim Cott than Nolan Ryan. But Nolan Ryan's cards are way more valuable because the demand is exceptional for Nolan Ryan. So I think the thought process here is great. And I do think that there are a lot of people who collect Hall of Famers, myself included, right? I collect, like right now, one of the things that I've been collecting are T206 Hall of Famers. And there are going to be people that put together Hall of Fame runs. And Jim Kaat is a Hall of Famer. So by making the Hall of Fame, the demand is always going to be there for his stuff. And right now, his stuff is very cheap. So I think there will continue to be demand. I think that his stuff is probably going to increase in value. But I don't think that Jim Kaat is going to suddenly, people are going to wake up and go, oh my gosh, Jim Kaat cards are so affordable and Dave Winfield cards are not affordable, so let's go pour a bunch of money into Jim Kaat's. I don't really think that's going to happen. But we have to keep our eye out. We have to keep shaking the bushes and keep our nose to the ground and try to sniff out any of those anomalies. Just like in my video on Monday. In my video on Monday, I said, guys, everybody's saying buy cards at card shows. But if you go on Market Movers, for example, or Card Ladder, for example, and you look at all the recent sales of whatever card, and you go, why did that one sell for way less than that one and that one and that one? And then that one sold for way less than that one and that one and that one. And then you look and you go, interesting. All the ones that are selling for cheap are on the golden auctions. And all the ones that are selling for the most are the eBay auctions. That's an anomaly that we can take advantage of. We can go, we should be buying from golden and selling on eBay. And there are more anomalies out there. Now, if I had them all, I would be quite wealthy. I am certainly not. I certainly like looking at things that don't seem right and then investigating them and trying to be like a little detective to determine what's actually happening. So that's what I love about this. But I don't think it's that Jim Kaat cards just happen to be significantly overlooked and undervalued. I think this is a demand issue. The supply is less for Kaat, but the demand is so much more for Dave Winfield that it makes up for the supply issue and has a much higher price. That's my perspective. Could I be wrong? Absolutely. I'm wrong all the time. Just ask my wife. Just ask my wife. She'll tell you I'm wrong all the time. Not really. She likes me, I think, still. But I like that thought process. What we all need to be doing is looking for those anomalies, investigating them, and then exploiting them to our advantage. And doing it so that we can afford to finance our card collecting habit. That's my perspective, at least. So, those are our 5 questions. Weren't those great questions? There were more good questions, but again, I just picked 5 because this is already a long video. If you're still listening, thank you. And it would be 2 hours long if I picked all of the good questions. So if you have a question for an upcoming episode that you want to hear my opinion on, and that's all these are, down below in the comments, please simply type your question. And as always, I look forward to them. And I genuinely mean that. I genuinely look forward to your questions, your thoughts, and your consideration.